Welcome back to Lucore Automotive Services. Today we are working on the Falcon from Street Race Channel. Tommy from Gen 2 Garage dropped this thing off yesterday. We got it racked up, we got the back tires off, which is a challenge in and of itself. But they wanted to do a little maintenance to it, so we are going to put a fresh ring and pinion and a fresh bearing set in the rear gear. This rear end has put a couple hundred passes on it. It's done very well, but we're going to set it up with a new one so that he can hopefully enter the new season with a solid rear and keep moving forward and winning races. If you want to see what I do, stick around, click like, subscribe, leave us a comment below. Wow, that could have ended worse. I wasn't expecting that bolt to come out. I guess I didn't quite get that stuck in there, huh? Gravity strikes again. Looks pretty good. It's got all its teeth on it still. Yeah, we got some sparkles in there. Let's take some measurements and see where we're at. Feels pretty good. Looks like we got about 9 thou backlash, which isn't bad. The patterns, not too bad. The amount of load that's going into this thing's ridiculous. The pinion preload feels kind of loose. But we'll check that when we get it apart. I'm going to go ahead and measure my pinion depth with the pinion depth gauge. And then we'll set up the new ring and pinion on all the old stuff. It should go back together pretty close to where I had it before. But he was saying that this thing, when it was cold, whined a little bit. So we're going to see if I was off by a couple thou, and we'll make that remedy and make it even better. But I'm impressed for how many passes this thing took. It looks pretty good. Oh, I needed a bucket under that one. We'll be smart and put a bucket under this side. Ouch. I got some backlash. They don't look too bad. A little bit of distortion on them, but that's probably due to the loads these things are experiencing. There's a little dust on the magnet, but nothing really too major, especially considering how much metal was in this thing the last time it came apart. Pinion preload, I'm not feeling any major preload on it. That's not uncommon. They loosen up over time. I'm not feeling any end play. I'm not seeing any movement on my nut. I'm not feeling any looseness in the yoke. So I'm going to take a baseline measurement of where this pinion is at, just so that I know, and then I'm going to compare that with where it's supposed to be. And if I need to make an adjustment to pinion depth, I will when I install the new gear. The new gear is the exact same gear as what we put in this the last time. We're only changing the gear and the ring and pinion and the bearings, so it really should just come apart and go back together. But looking at my pattern, we might be able to make a little bit better improvement on the pinion depth. When I set this car up, I don't believe I had the pinion depth checking tool at that time. I was still doing it by assemble it, gear marking compound, check backlash, repeat until the pattern looks good. So we'll see how close I am when we get it all checked up. Let me get the pinion depth tool in there. So my pinion depth, my calibrated pinion tool is rated for 3.5 inches. I'm reading 0.745 on the pinion gauge, which gets me a pinion depth, an actual pinion depth of 2.755. So I'm like 10 thou off of optimal, which 10 thou is not a lot, but in rear end it is a lot. So I'm glad I'm setting it up with the tools, and I'm starting with a good ring and pinion. Looks like that one had a number on it. Yeah, its optimal reading for that one would have been a 2.62. I'm at 2.75. And it's all this math. The new ring gear, I think, is 2.63. So yeah, our new ring gear is 2.630. So let me figure out what I got to do to make that where it needs to be. I'm at 2.755. I need to go to 2.762. Sorry, 2.763 is my target. Let me write that down because I'm going to forget it. Well, I'm going to head out for today. My brain's mush. My reading is saying I need to bring this pinion a lot deeper than what it is currently, and that makes sense by my wear pattern. So I'm going to do a couple more measurements in the morning when my brain's fresh, and we'll pull this thing apart. We'll set up the new pinion and bearings with what I think it needs, and we'll use the pinion depth gauge tool to set it up, and then we'll set our side lash and our backlash, and then we'll set our side bearing preload, and then we'll run a pattern and we'll see what it looks like. Then we'll go from there, because that's what you do. Rear end's pretty clean. It is starting to make a little bit of metal, but no, it seemed to work just fine. So we'll set it up again with the tools and see how much better we can make it. So I wouldn't have been able to sleep tonight had I not gone back and read the directions again. For whatever reason, I was thinking the measured depth was 3.50. The actual measured depth for the gauge I'm using is 3.375. And when you subtract the 0.4745 from that, you get exactly 2.63, which is what I want. So I get to take this apart tomorrow and put it back together exactly the same as I took it apart today, and then check my preloads and my backlash. So yay, I didn't completely screw it up the last time I did it. Haha. Yay me. It actually measures the exact for the new pinion. The new pinion wants 2.63. This one's 2.62, which actually looks like 629, but I don't know that they go that far. But so it's 2.63 as well. So, and that's where it's at. So I set it up by eyeball for dead on. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
That makes me feel good.
And this one is actually etched into the pinion too, right?
That one's etched into the pinion. That one's etched into the pinion. So I have target numbers. So this is the nice thing about taking one apart when it's still together. I can take a measurement to see where it's at. My new one, my old one have numbers. So if they're different, I can calculate 1 thou or 2 thou into the pinion depth,
right,
and just put it in and be done with it. Where these two are so close to one another, I should be able to just switch the pinion shim out, put a crush, well, I'll set it up and check it, and then I'll take it apart and do a final assembly. But at least that's off my head, and I won't have to think about that all night, because I didn't sleep last night. Hopefully I can sleep tonight. So.
I didn't mention in the PRI video, but the fact that some of those pinions come without any kind of etchings or stamps on the end of them.
Oh, it's such a pain in the butt.
So it's just like, well, good luck. Set it up and see what it gets, and then start working from there. That's why when I cut that packaging open, I looked on the end of it. I'm like, okay, good. It's got scribing on it.
It makes life so much easier.
I don't know why they make them otherwise.
I mean, you have to have the tool to set them up correctly that way. I mean, If you don't have the tools, you're setting them up by eyeball anyway. But
yeah, but like, why wouldn't you put that information on there? We've had a couple gear sets that didn't have that.
we have had several, and it makes it a lot harder of a job.
Not to name any names, but
It is what it is. So. I'm going to bed. Have a good night, guys. You guys will see me in the morning. Vapor hone makes aluminum look flipping great.
it looks
Can still see the casting flash. You can still see the part numbers in it. We did aluminum oxide to get it clean, to strip it in the dry cabinet, and then we did the vapor hone, which polishes it. And I mean,
That looks fantastic.
Other than the score, oh hey, look at that. Hey, there's a knockout in there. If you need more belt, you can knock the little knockout out. That's why your belt doesn't get tight on your car.
Because mine's been knocked out.
Because yours hasn't been knocked out.
Oh.
That's good to know. Little things you don't know until you know. Huh. Interesting.
Okay.
So it's tomorrow. Happened a lot faster for you guys than it did for me. I went through, I double checked all my numbers, my measurements, the numbers I'm using for my measurements, and everything checks out good. I'm gonna pull my old pinion out, pull my pinion shim out, place that on my new pinion, put it back together, double check my pinion depth. If everything looks good, which it should look perfect, then we will do a final assembly, put this thing back together, and get it moving down the road. Awesome stuff. Wear on my pinion yoke looks good, and I don't have any excessive play on my splines, so this yoke can be reused without a problem. Look at that, it's the crush sleeve. It held up just fine. Let me pull this bearing off. Looks all right. I think I'll set up the new pinion probably with this one, so that I don't damage it checking it, and I can use the brand new bearing when I do my final assembly. Ding, fries are done. Alright, let's put our new rings in, our inner races. Really pretty clean, all things considered. Pretty happy with that. Pull our magnet out, clean it off. So my old shim, my old pinion shim, is actually distorted. It measures out like 30 thou, so I won't be able to reuse this shim, but I've got some new shims. They measure out to 30 thou, so I'm going to put those in behind my new bearing and my new pinion. We'll set it up and we'll double check our pinion depth. Hopefully it'll be right and I won't have to do it 10 times. Hear the tone change when it bottoms. Sorry, Austin. 10 minutes of nothing. Oh well. She's bottomed. think that's right where I want to be. Let me double check my numbers. That's 745. I am using the long tube, which is 3.375. I have a measured depth of 0.745, which puts me exactly at my desired pinion depth of 2.63 inches from pinion center line. So I had to I started with a 30 thou shim, which is what I thought was in there. The shim that was in there was distorted pretty bad from the thrust loads that this differential is using, or seeing. And actually the slinger on the front has also been distorted, so I'm probably going to put this together without a slinger in the front because it's one less piece of metal that can distort and release pinion preload. The cast piece isn't going to get distorted and get pressed and punched and beat around from the load forces being imposed on this setup. So it's just one less thing for me to have that can go bad and create changes in the pinion preload. So I have my shim depth, I'm happy with that. I can actually just knock the pin. No, I gotta put a new crush sleeve on it. So I'll pop this out one last time, put a new crush sleeve on it, reassemble it, install my pinion seal, get my pinion depth, get my pinion bearing preload set to where I want it, and then I'll start working on the carrier. Awesome, moving forward. And yes, I am as tired of listening to that compressor as you are, so I'm trying to do something about that here in the next month or so, because I'm tired of hearing it rattle in the background as much as you are. My old compressor is actually much quieter than this one, but the motor on it burned up a long time ago, so I just put the other one into use and never got around to fixing the old compressor, so I have everything here to do it. As I recall, it is a substantially less noisy compressor than the one that the big red you hear hammering in the background every day. Let's see if we can't get that thing wired up before the end of the year. So this is my old pinion shim. You can actually see that it's hammered and distorted. And then this is the slinger that goes behind the pinion seal. It helps reduce pinion seal leaks. But it's also getting hammered and it's thinner where it makes contact with the components, and that thrust load on that pinion going back and forth has distorted this guy too. So I'm actually using a thinner pinion shim. I've got a 25 thou shim in there, and I'm going to leave this guy out because this guy not being in there means that it won't get distorted and get thinner. So, but yeah, these things are hammered. Alright, new crush sleeve. Pinion seals in, put a little lubie on there. New nut. Drive her home. 15, just a hair more. I want to see it at like 20 inch-pounds of rotational torque.
I'm just a ball of helplessness over here.
20 inch-pounds, I'm good with that. So my pinion's done. I need to put my reluctor wheel back on. I'll do that right now so I don't forget later. Alright, speed sensor's back on. Air gap's supposed to be on that. I feel like there's a better way to set that up. But that will be on them. Make some marks to mark my pinion nut to my pinion shaft so that we know that our nut's not moving. Huge. The hard part's done. Let's get our bearings put on our carrier. Move to the next step. Two dots. Mark up. My markings on my main caps are in alignment. Two dots, one dot, so I know my caps are in the correct places. I actually set this up and then I torqued my ring gear, let it sit overnight, and then I rechecked my pattern and I'm like, oh, my pattern's off. So make sure your ring gear is torqued to specification before you set up your rear end. The difference between it being loose and actually properly torqued was 10 thousandths. So I'm going to lock these down, torque them to spec. On this 8.8, it's 80 foot-pounds for your main cap and your ring gear bolts. So I'm going to torque those real quick, and then we'll double check our backlash. And I'll let you see the pattern that's on here now, because it's basically a pinion depth correct, but backlash incorrect, where gear marking compound pattern, which is unique because it's a good pattern, but they're offset from one another front to back. We get this torqued in. Ooh, 6 style backlash. I like that. Nice and snug. If this was a rear end for like a normal truck or, you know, road going car, I would set my initial backlash up at like 8 thousandths, maybe even 9, but it would depend on what the specification is for the vehicle. Some of the bigger truck ring gears want a little more backlash because they expect them to be hauling heavier loads and thermal expansion and all that stuff. So, but I got a good pattern on here that shows proper pinion depth but incorrect backlash, basically a loose backlash. I'll show that to you real quick. I don't know if you can see this or not, but you can see my patterns from here to here. And if you look at the other side, it's here to here. So they're offset to one another, from there to there, and there to there. So as I close my backlash up, this one should move backward or forward, however you want to call it, towards center. And this one should also move to to the toe side, which is closer to center. So if I wipe this out, run a new pattern, my pattern should improve. That side should move towards center, and that pattern should move towards center. Heel side, toe side. Drive side, coast side. Take it. So we are a tight 6 thou on backlash. So now you can see my drive side is nice and center. My coast side is still a little close to the toe, but that's coast side. I'm not as worried about that. That would probably center up a little bit more if my backlash was a little bit looser. So I've got a nice tight backlash at 6 thou. My pinion depth is exactly where it's supposed to be according to my pinion depth gauge, assuming I read my gauge right and did the proper math. But that is what it is. It looks really good. My pattern verifies that I'm in a good pinion position. So now it's time to put the axles in and put her back together. That's better. So I need to torque those to 25 foot-pounds. You guys got them to fit snug. Lordy. So I cleaned up my upper magnet. That way we can kind of monitor how much metal this thing makes. It's going to make some off the bat for wearing in the new ring and pinion set to one another. It's not a big deal, but when you start seeing big sparkles, it's time to do a little preventative maintenance. I'm going to go ahead and put some fluid in this thing, and I'm going to pull it out and probably do at least a quick drive with it, see how much fuel they have in this thing, and then probably just get like one warm-up cycle on it, and then it'll be time for them to come and get this thing. Let me get some fluid in this before I do something silly and get distracted. Well, that wraps up this session with this Falcon. Now if we can let this thing go fly, should do all right. Get this thing outside.